Hey everyone, this message is specifically to my fellow millennials. Those of you who are 30 to 40, maybe you're approaching 30, maybe you're just past 40. But essentially, it's for people who identify themselves within this space where a lot has been happening. Okay, now why am I doing this? I know there's a lot of YouTube videos out there where it's really fun and sort of like amazing and engaging and attractive to the younger generation, which is really good. We need that stuff. But often, those who are 30 to 40 are left out. Maybe even those outside of 40 are left out. But I want to speak to those who are within this age range because, again, I'm within that age range myself. And so this is a call to wake you up from the whole burnout cycle. We need to break away from burnout. I'm hearing this again and again and again. Personally, for me, I've been burnt out quite a few times, and that's not a good thing. That is not a good thing. But I want to break it down in terms of why we get burnt out and what contributes to some of this stuff. Now, essentially, burnout is that thing where you feel like you just don't have the energy to do anything anymore, okay? And this could be down to multiple different stuff. It could be to the fact that you have people around you who are just chatting rubbish. You may not be aligned to certain values when it comes to delivering work at pace or whatever it may be. It may be a toxic environment. You may be overly tired, etc., etc. There are all these micro and macro stresses that contribute to you feeling burnt out, and you just don't have the energy to do anything no more. It's just not there. There's no flame to ignite you anymore. And so essentially, I want you to recognize that we've been through a lot, you know. Like, it's been mad. And I've actually got a list of things that we have specifically gone through, okay? So I'm going to highlight some of this stuff. So give me a few moments. So again, we have the rise of technology. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing, but you have to remember, we grew up with this. We grew up with the internet. It didn't start off with, I don't know, WhatsApp or Instagram or TikTok or any of these things. We had to keep up. Like, we didn't come into this generation with all of this stuff at our fingertips. This stuff just popped up in our face. And so progressively, we've had to adapt to these ever-changing forms of communication and stimulation and engagement and keeping up with the Joneses, so to speak, etc., etc. And unfortunately for some of us, we've lost our souls. We haven't been able to stay grounded and rooted in what truly matters. So there was the dot-com boom and the rise of the internet. Then there was the 9/11 terrorist attacks, okay? Now there's questions around, should we say the legitimacy of who actually produced these attacks? But we're not going to get into all of that stuff. The point being made is it happened and we all saw it. I remember exactly where I was. I don't think anyone who witnessed that forgot where they were during that time. They probably even have potentially relatives who may have been lost, or people who were close to the area, or people who could have been there. It was traumatizing, like genuinely traumatizing, and something I'll never forget. I've actually been to New York where the memorial site is, where one of the towers collapsed, and the energy is just mad off. It doesn't feel great. You can still feel there's a really heavy spirit there. Now, some of you don't know about this one, but the SARS epidemic, okay, so this is almost like a COVID, but in selected regions of the world. And so this was actually a pre-warning, so to speak, back in 2003, to basically tell the countries in the world that they need to prepare. That there was this long document that pretty much many countries ignored in case there was ever going to be a pandemic. Anyway, that's interesting to know. There was the London bombings, for those of you who are in London, okay? That's not something that we're used to seeing. Of course, bombings happened before, but that kind of like rattled people's spirits. I think I was probably in secondary school during that time. I think I was roughly around the age of 14 or whatever it may be. Anyone could have been on that bus. Anyone. I think it was 7th of July, 2005. I haven't got the exact date, but I remember my friend saying it was on their birthday. Madness. Global financial crisis, 2007 to 2008. You got the housing crisis and subprime mortgage collapse, 2008. The Arab Spring movement, 2010 to 2020. You've also got Occupy Wall Street movement. You've got the Me Too movement. You've got Black Lives Matter. You've got COVID-19. You've got the Brexit referendum. You've got I said the COVID pandemic, didn't I? You've got the cost of living crisis that's happening right now. What the hell? Every single time you feel like you're making strides, oh, nope, you need to make 5 times more your income. Oh, nope, you need to make 10 times more your income. It's a lot, man. It's a lot. It's very annoying and it's very frustrating. So it's almost like you need to make insane wealth in order for you to get to whatever level or success that you want to get to. And so with that in mind, you start thinking about side hustles. You start thinking about, okay, how can I make money differently? And so what has happened is, with all of this stuff that's happening, there's been more noise. Okay, there's been more noise. There's been more noise when it comes to YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, all the socials, all the search engine optimization friendly stuff as well. Like everything digital has been throwing at how can one make more money. And of course, as time has gone on, it's become less scammy and spammy and more sort of like authentic, so to speak, and aligned to a sense of passion or whatever it may be. And so with that in mind, all this noise plus all this stress creates a lot of pressure to try to perform. That's what ends up happening. And so we're stuck in this situation where we feel like we have to overperform. I mean, I've got some information here. Obviously, I write some notes to sort of trigger me, but we end up being in a space where we multitask and overcommit. Okay, we get to a point where we're like, oh gosh, I need to do this, I need to do that, I need to make sure every area of my life is on point, or we just shut off and it looks like we're zoned out because we're so overstimulated. And it's like, if you ignore this person, then there's X consequence. If you don't do this, then there's Y consequence. There's all this stuff happening. And it creates this mental issue. That's why mental health is such a big thing right now, because we're so overstimulated. And so what is the solution to this? Well, I'm going to talk it through. I'm going to talk through this whole problem first and see if a solution that comes out of it. The point being made is we're off whack. Our work-life balance is non-existent. We are quiet quitting by the numbers. We're trying to seek our own way of doing our own thing. Why do you think I started talking about contracting? It was phase 2 of the escape plan, if you want to call it that. There's more financial pressures, as I stated before. There's career instability because we're doing more of our own thing. But also we want to make sure that we're aligned to making sure we are the true custodians of the earth and everything else, okay, depending on what type of millennial you are. So there's a lot of pressure. But then you're seeing, the people above us in Generation X, if you want to call it that, and this is a bit of a judgment, if you can call it that, en masse, they seem a bit more to themselves, doing what they're doing. We had the baby boomers, who are most likely our parents, not for all of us, but most likely, who are rooted in their own mindset, should we say. And obviously they were a result of what happened after the war. So of course they're going to have a different ideal when it comes to the world. Why am I saying all this stuff? All of this information shapes you as a person. And I want you to understand that, yes, even though there are all these pressures that happen, there needs to be a way to quieten the noise. There has to be a way. Because otherwise, it's always going to be like this. And you're going to die miserably and without any sense of purpose. That's terrible. And many people die this way. This is life. Sometimes people are called to life for that reason. But the reality is you will die without that sense of meaning or purpose or whatever it may be, just living day to day. For what? What's the point? I know this is very sort of like, I think it's nihilistic. Maybe that's the term, but it's true. It becomes to be a what's the point situation. And so obviously I want to be part of a force that helps empower, educate, and entertain people in a way that enables them to want more, have more, and be more. Okay. Now I want to give you a bit of like sort of context in terms of the different types of generations and why we stand out. Okay. So of course we have these different types of generations that we're aware of. So we have the silent generation, which is those who grew up in the Great Depression. So during World War II and all that kind of stuff there. And they're known for being a bit more respectful. They're very principle based. They're very focused. They have a good sense of order and stability. They do things a certain way. They're patterned, should we say, yeah? Like this is this and that is that. There's no confusion, okay? Like in the current world that we're in at the moment, okay? So you could argue they're quite conservative by nature. That's just naturally what they were like because of all of the stuff that was happening. They had no time to be thinking left, right, all of this kind of stuff. Like this is what it was. They had to make decisions and know what they knew. So it was very foundations based, very grounded and rooted. Okay. So these people were born between 1925 to 1942. And their archetype, their sort of like archetype is known as a hero generation. Okay. A civic or hero generation. Then you've got their kids, the baby boomers. So these were born between 1943 and 1960. Okay. So these are known as the prophet generation or idealists. So essentially, they saw the economic boom. They saw the opportunities that happened outside of, all of this stuff that were going on in the war times. Okay. So they took advantage of it. They wanted to change culture, and there was more of a revolution sort of thing, that whole sort of like hippie movement. So they were associated with idealism, individualism, some may call it narcissism or selfishness, and social activism. So it was very much power to the people, let's go sort of thing. That was the energy that was coming. Then they had their kids, and their kids were Generation X. So these people were born between 1961 and 1980. So they're known as a nomad generation or reactive. If I think of the word reactive, it's not proactive. They don't go out and do. If something happens, then they'll react. So they grew up during a time of rapid technology development, like rapid. So this is less to do with the digital, but more to do with tech. Okay. There's a lot of economic uncertainty. So if you think about it, this is when the gold standard changed in 1971 with President Nixon, when he removed the gold reserves and all that kind of stuff there. And the dollar wasn't backed by gold anymore, which created all this craziness. There's quantitative easing, blah, 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 all of this stuff happening. Mess, complete mess. This is all foundations for where we're coming to, by the way. And so usually they're characterized by independence, adaptability, and skeptical of institutions in general. Okay, they just have a certain way of thinking. Okay, they're not really on it, but they really keep themselves to themselves, if I'm honest with you. You don't really notice them. They're the sort of workers who are working diligently, working hard. They're not really the ones moaning. Yeah, if they moan, it's not that deep. Okay, it's different, but they're getting on with it. You've seen the memes, you've seen the videos. Then you got the millennials, okay? So they're also known as Generation Y. So that's 1981 to 1996. So that's us, okay? So they are synonymous to the silent generation, which is also seen as the hero generation, okay? So they've come during a time of a rise of the internet boom. Globalization is a big thing. So where America has literally tried to westernize everything, China's pretty much trying to do the same thing with Africa and other BRICS nations or whatever it may be. And so they're embracing or growing up with technology, values, diversity. They're seeking work-life balance. They know life needs to be a certain way. They're really molding society, and they're not afraid to say it. But again, you've seen people say we complain too much or we're snowflake generations, whatever. This is who we are. Everyone has their place. And then you have Generation Z, which everyone's banging on about at the moment. So these are known as the artist or adaptive generations, okay? So they're the first generation that has entirely grown up with the digital age. That's what they know, That's all they know. They don't know about all these other little things here and there, blah, 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 okay? They may not appreciate things like, I don't know, a GameCube or Pokemon or Nintendo 64 or whatever it may be. Of course, they may have an idea, but they don't know what certain things are. And so they're known for their tech savviness, socially conscious, and pragmatism. Okay, they're just going to go out and get it. A lot of them are lazy. I'm joking. Or am I? I don't know. I know there's a difference though. I know they'll only do what they'll only do certain things if it consciously and pragmatically makes sense. Or if there's a benefit for them. They just have a different way of working, I've realized. It's not the same. And so if you understand these differences, you can understand where you are in this space. Why am I saying all this stuff? I'm saying this stuff because I'm focusing on millennials. If you look at your differences between the two, we've come at a time where information is unprecedented. Like nothing stayed the same. You could say the same for other ones, but I'm just talking to us. Nothing stayed the same. It was just exponential growth. I think HTTP, the internet, was developed back in 1990, and literally it's just done this. Well, let me do it the other way. Is it this way? It's just done this. Parkinson's law states that a computer's processing power doubles every 18 to 24 months. I think there's the theory of singularity, which states that by 2030, tech, digital, AI, whatever it may be, will reach a point where there's nothing we can do about it. It's just doing its own thing. It's just doing its own thing. I'm saying this to say we need to rethink how we're approaching life. Don't get stuck in the burnout cycle. Break out from it. You need to break out from it. And if it means you need to step back and look at everything that's going on and think to yourself, what is truly important to me? That's what you need to focus on. Sometimes it's hard for us to do this if we don't have some sort of models. So here are some things to think about, okay? Number one, what do you truly believe? And before I continue, the information I got from the generation stuff was from a book called The Fourth Turning, okay? So if anyone's interested in that book, you can check it out. And some of the concepts I'm talking about is from a book called The Purpose Factor. That's a pretty good book as well, okay? And so the first thing you want to start thinking about is, what do I truly believe as a person? What do I truly believe? What do you believe about yourself? What do you believe about other people around you? And what do you believe about the world? What do you truly believe? The next thing you need to start thinking about is, what do you truly value? In other words, what is truly important to you? And how do you decipher this stuff? You ask yourself questions again. You need to ask yourself questions such as, okay, what does a good friend look like to me? What does a bad friend look like to me? What are some great things that have happened in my life so far? What are some terrible things that have happened in my life? Why do I do what I do now? These things will give you a sort of like list of words based on what you value. And so with all this information, you need to see, okay, really and truly, number one, why you believe these things. And number two, if they support you or if they challenge you or don't help you at all. You need to know this because you're trying to get an idea of what you want to focus on. There are different types of purposes that we have in our lives, okay? Now, I'm obviously thinking about this on the spot, but essentially I believe there are functional purposes. So a functional purpose is where you have a specific role, okay? Maybe you're a brother, you're a mother, father, sister, whatever it may be, work colleague. That's a functional purpose. You have a specific role that you need to play. There is also an existential purpose. Okay, so an existential purpose is one that's bigger than you, but is connected to you. It's aligned to you in some way, shape, and form. And that's always hovering in some way. And really and truly, this existential purpose should help you make decisions. And they're really rooted in your value system. They really are. Your existential purpose may be rooted around the fact that maybe you feel like you want to help people in a specific ways. Now, I think most people want to help people or themselves. It doesn't really matter. It's kind of the same thing if you really look at it deeply. But essentially, maybe you want to help people specifically in careers. Maybe you want to help people specifically when it comes to social movements. Maybe you want to help people specifically when it comes to building things. Whatever it may be, everyone has an existential overarching sort of purpose. And how you solve that problem, when you solve that problem, and who you solve it for is really important. Sometimes the problems you need to solve are purely your own. If anything, I would say that's essentially what you're doing at the beginning. You're solving your own problems, maybe initially from functional purposes, which turn into something that you can translate into helping others with later on. I'm not saying everyone needs to start a business or whatever it may be, but you need to know what you need to start with. And again, I've spoken about this before, and I'll share this on my screen in a second. Essentially, in my life management system, I have this whole sort of like four segmented things that help me understand kind of like how I sort of like break up life, okay? So essentially, this is my pillars of mastery, if you can see it. Let me just make it bigger. And you can see all this stuff here. I'm making this wider. You can see all these different things here. I've rated them, blah, blah, blah. But I want you to see these ones: progression, performance, people, and personal, okay? And those different sort of like areas and categories speak to different areas that I want to focus on. So what are these really? So when it comes to the progression sort of side of things, that's centered around business, portfolio, careers, wealth generation. That's really sort of like a numbers game, so to speak. And this is related to the sort of person that I want to be. When it comes to performance, that really comes down to what I'm eating, how I'm exercising, and how I'm managing my mind. Okay. So these are ways in which I look at it. Then you've also got the personal. So the personal stuff is more to do with, again, personal development, fun, my house management as well, my environment, all of that kind of stuff there. And when it comes to people, this really comes down to things like community and relationships with friends and family, and also my significant other. These are different ways to think about it. Now, I can't do all of this at the same time, even though I'm doing it all of it at the same time without thinking about it. But there are going to be certain things that move the needle for me personally that I have more of a focus on, and certain things I just do automatically. I'm saying this to say that you have to be able to follow one course until successful, or follow few courses until successful, because it will feel like less pressure. If you need to, I mean, I want to see if I can show you this on my phone, okay? Because boy, I just can't spend all this time on my phone, okay? Hopefully you can see it. You can't see it necessarily, but essentially it should say taking a break, yeah? And I'll be back when I want. That's what's on my WhatsApp. I'm not playing, you know. If you saw my phone before, it was a black screen. No apps on there. They were all hidden. Okay. I've removed all notifications. And because I know I've got a bit of a habit going into apps anyway, that's when I check the messages. That's when I check them. I'm not doing this thing. Like, I've removed it all, you know. And I'm only checking it when I want to. I don't want to be dictated by any of this stuff. When it comes to some of my stuff on the desktop, some of the notifications are removed as well. If I go into my Facebook, I'm using Facebook Eradicator. It only shows me a quote. It doesn't show me the whole feed. It doesn't show me the stuff, because I'm trying to take more control of what I am doing, as opposed to being run or directed by this stuff. Secondly, I'm not saying yes to everything. So for example, when it comes to the coaching stuff, I'm not coaching everyone under the sun. I don't have the time right now. I'm preparing some big things in my personal life, me and my partner. And so I need to focus on that. And if it disappoints people, that's unfortunate. It's not deliberate in that sense. I'm not trying to hurt anyone, but I know I need to focus on that stuff. When it comes to, you know, the business stuff, and it's an interesting one. You know, you've obviously seen me doing more sporadic videos like this, or more sort of raw, unfiltered ones. This is helping my mental health, truly, because it means I can just talk about what I want to talk about. Yeah, do a bit of prep beforehand, nothing too strenuous. But there's not like a crazy process, or like, look, systems work. They definitely do. But if you're feeling burnt out, there's a time and a place for that stuff. I really do believe that. And really, your success is rooted in authentic, intelligent consistency. Let me break that down. Authentic means it needs to be aligned to you. It doesn't mean lazy. Let's not mistake in that, because sometimes when we say authentic, we think, oh yeah, let me just relax and da-da-da. No. We're saying it needs to be aligned to you. You know if something is authentic if it feels joyful or loving. If it feels just right, whatever right means to you, because that's a subjective term in itself. And so with that in mind, you then have intelligence. So intelligent means it is directed based on the results and outcomes that you get or have got from life. And then consistency, that is basically making sure that you commit to the cause. There's a commitment, you're disciplined. Now, the word discipline may sound a bit icky when you've got authentic there. It's not necessarily a discipline, even though it is in the bare knuckles. But it's something that you're just doing every single day. You're willing to do every single day. That's where the success will come. And so looking at those 4 areas, progress, performance, people, personal, you then have to think to yourself, okay, cool, I know what the areas are, but how do I sort of like attack these in different levels? I'll be honest with you, I don't try and do anything too sort of like difficult. I know everyone's trying to like create their own sort of like theories and all that kind of stuff there because they want to stand out, but I just keep it to basics. I think that's the best thing to do. And let's look at it. It's Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Maslow's hierarchy of needs. That's all we need to focus on at the end of the day. And let me show you Wikipedia's version of it as well. Okay, so let me just share my screen. So we got Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And maybe you haven't seen this one before. This is the one that Maslow wrote about in his book. Most people are used to seeing the 5 levels, but there's actually 8 levels. I'm not going to go through all 8. Everyone's trying to reach a level of self-actualization or transcendence, and this is where it doesn't even feel like you anymore. You're being moved by the spirit, so to speak. Yeah, but let's keep it on certain levels. You got the psychological, safety, belonging, esteem, cognitive, etc., etc. Okay, so let's think about this from a psychological level, a physiological level. Sorry, I was saying it wrong. That's really to do with your body anatomy, all that kind of stuff there. If you remember Mrs. Gren or Mrs. Nerg back at sort of like secondary school, you got movement, respiration, sensory, all of this kind of stuff there. It's just making sure that the basics of your anatomy are being kept up to speed, so to speak. Okay, so you can see it with this example here. Okay, and you've got here hunger, basic salary, all of this kind of stuff. This is a really good sort of like example. And so that's the physiological needs. Then you've got safety needs. Let's get back to this. So safety needs is really centered around things like personal security, employment, resources, health. So looking at this stuff, you've got the base physiological stuff sorted, okay? But really and truly, do you have, let me close this because they always have this rubbish here, save and exit. Do you have like personal security sorted? So when I think about security, I'm thinking about things like insurance. I'm thinking about things like pensions. I'm thinking about things like life plans and everything else. From your employment standpoint, if you're a contractor, it's different, but have you got yourself set up properly? Okay, and look at my previous videos to think about what that looks like specifically. So for contractors, they're looking at business insurance. They're making sure that they have the right benefits with their umbrella company if they're inside IR35. They make sure they got a solid accountant that can do their taxes for them if they're outside of IR35 or potentially doing both. They make sure that they have the right sort of network to make sure they get contracts or have the right sane mind. They go to the right events. They make sure all of this stuff is happening. That's from a contracting standpoint. Of course, if you're an employee for an organization, you're permanent, it's going to be different as well, but slightly similar in some cases as well. If you're an entrepreneur, again, these are some things you need to think about as well. What do you have in place? Sometimes you need to focus on the foundations. When it comes to your health, do you have basic health on point? Basic health. When I say basic health, I'm talking about not overeating sugars or bleached or white food. Making sure you drink water regularly or having your multivitamins, okay? This is from Asda, it's nothing special, but having your multivitamins is making sure that you go for walks every day. Maybe you're not a gym person, maybe you can't do activities, but walks will do enough in some way, shape or form. If you read the book Ikigai, it talks about this stuff where you've got centenarians, I think it's articulated as, in Okinawa, Japan, who are far outliving 100, like it's normal for them. And they don't do any excessive exercise like that. Their diet is decent, okay? They have a high sort of like fish protein diet with lots of vegetables, not a lot of processed foods, and they keep it simple. When it comes to resources, what is your money saying? Have you read, I think it's Dave Ramsey's 7 Baby Pips formula or something like that, or Money Makeover? Let me just check it so you can see it for yourself. Dave Ramsey Money Makeover. Let's just see. And let's go to images and let's show you these images. Yes, this is a great book. I mean, I know a lot of these books are sort of like American focused and everything else, but this book is fantastic. It talks about these different steps. I think there are 7. I've kind of followed them intuitively anyway. It's a great read. There's also some other stuff for people within the UK. It's the Monzo book. Okay, so Monzo book UK. Let me just see what that looks like. You'll probably know what I'm talking about. This is the one. Is this it? Yeah. A User's Guide. Laura Watley. Fantastic book for UK people, okay, to check out. Have you got those basics sorted out? What does that look like for you specifically? Okay. So that's what we think about when it comes to the safety needs. Okay. So think about this. The basic physiological needs, okay. Air, water, food, shelter, sleep, blah, 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 all of that kind of just there. And the safety needs, which comes down to employment, security, health, property, etc. Now, of course, one thing I didn't mention with the physiological needs is that sleep is a big one. And the best way to prepare for sleep is the night before. It's the night before. You have to prepare the night before, because if the night before is rubbish based on the fact that you've eaten late, or you're playing games, or you're watching Netflix, or you're speaking to someone on the phone, or you've come back from an event late, or whatever it may be, it's not going to work. Okay. And sometimes ways to help you sleep is to maybe exercise late. That will knock you out. That will definitely knock you out. Okay. Other things are making sure that you only watch and do certain things if you've completed something. Having certain days and times to do it with your partner, as an example. Sometimes it's your partner who's the bad influence. I think I'm the bad influence for my missus sometimes. She's very good. She goes to bed early. Sometimes, well, not sometimes, more often than not, I go to bed a bit later. That's what happens at times, you know? So there has to be a discipline the day before. Okay. I'm not talking about routines necessarily because that makes it feel pressurized, but just be smart about it. Like if you want to get something, it's very simple. It's very first principles. If you want to get something done and you need to get it done early in the morning, whatever it may be, you just need to go to bed earlier or suffer the consequences of waking up without enough sleep. That's the reality of the situation. I haven't used an alarm clock for about 6 years, I want to say. I just haven't. There's been no need. There's been no need because I trust my body clock. Do you know what I mean? Whether I sleep within time or not, I just haven't. So think about these different things. Then we have love and belonging. Okay, so let me come back to my screen. So love and belonging, okay? Just a caveat, okay? And again, this is all about the whole burnout thing. This is not trying to create pressure. You're doing this one at a time. Give yourself seasons to do this stuff. Sometimes you may be in a season where you can't focus on certain things. You just need to get certain stuff done. That's okay. But there needs to be something that you're working towards. Does that make sense? And this stuff doesn't need to be done in order. Maslow never said it has to be done in order. He said, yeah, typically it is likely going to be done in a certain order because, again, there are deficiency needs and there are growth needs. So for example, deficiency needs are things that if you don't have, like you'll end up dead, or like you just need those things. You just need them. And those are the two at the bottom, the safety and the physiological. And then the growth needs, which are the love and belonging, esteem and self-actualization, etc., that supports your this and the whole spiritual concept of things. It's a bit more that comes into play. So once you're focusing purely on you, once you're solving your own problems, and I just want you to bear this in mind. Looking at this stuff, once you're solving this stuff, if you want to, if you have it in you, and if you're more entrepreneurial by nature, or if you want to help others or whatever it may be, find a way to track this, find a way to record this information. There are so many smart ways to do it. I mean, if you're exercising or making sure your health is on point, there are things like MyFitnessPal's. I'm sure many of you use. And look, if you're going to go in with that, I would do the premium version. It's so much better than the free version. The free version is still good, but the premium version just has all these other perks to it. Or maybe you want to use your Samsung or Apple Watch as an example, or your phone to track all of this information or whatever it may be. Okay, maybe you journal. Maybe you journal some of this stuff. It shouldn't feel like a chore. If this is something that you're called to do, then do it. But the reason why it's important is because you can look back and learn from it. You can look back and learn from it. Maybe you want to set up an accountability group or speak to someone or speak to your partner or siblings or whatever and just talk to them about your learnings. Maybe you just want to record it. Maybe you want to record your sort of learnings and stuff and your experience either for YouTube or just for yourself, which maybe you can release later, but you're doing it for yourself because it's an outlet. That's the point being made, because we need to find ways to express ourselves in some way, shape or form. We're all here to experience. That's the base reason. Okay. It sounds bland and boring, but it's true. Whether that, creates progress or not, there is something in that. So love and belonging comes next, where it comes to friendships, intimacy, family, sense of connection. As I'm going through this thing with my partner right now, relationships are becoming even more clearer. Boundaries are becoming clearer. Genuineness is coming clearer. It's becoming clear whether people are being purely selfish or purely doing things in the interest of us. It's clear. Like there's no dispute. There's no argument. It doesn't matter how people flower things up. When someone sees red, they see red. And sometimes you guys are burnt out because you see red, but you ignore it. You want to tell yourself you see blue. No, you see red. RED, nothing else. And when you see red, that means danger. So if you're worried about, and I'm saying this to myself as well, if you're worried about messing up relationships or whatever it may be, you still have to make the decision. You have to make the decision. You need to keep it moving. How you keep it moving is dependent upon you, but respect your boundaries, because sometimes a lot of the burnout comes down to people. If you speak to any program manager or any project manager who's been seasoned in the field, they'll tell you that, and these percentages are arbitrary, but the role job is 10 to 20% frameworks, tools, management, and 80 to 90% people management. This is why managing emotions is key. I talk about this so many times. Managing emotions is key. Self-management, self-awareness, social management, social awareness. All of this stuff is really, really, really important. And so sometimes we're burnt out because we keep on being fed nonsense from people. There's this book from someone called Dr. Sarah Cardon, I think, or Coden. And she's got this book called The Lies We Tell Ourselves. Oh my gosh, what a wake-up call. It's a short read, very informative and packed with punchy scientific information. But it makes you think, damn, I'm a liar, And we do this because of self-monitoring, because of the way we want to be perceived. But this is also burning you out. If you think about what burnout is, it isn't just doing again and again and again until you get exhausted. Burnout is a thing that you get if there's a cross in values. That's the reality of the situation. If there is a cross in values. And so if your values are being ignored, challenged, you're going to feel burnt out. I remember feeling that when I was working for NHS, whatever they were called. Okay, I'm not going to give the actual name. It was part of the NHS. Of course, I've said that now. But I won't give the actual name. It was too much. It was way too much. And so you have to think to yourself, like, what are you willing to do? What are you willing to do when it comes to people, especially in working environments? And this is why I quit. They say that we give up on stuff and everything. Yeah, because it's a different world, my friend. It's different. I don't care it's a different world. This is how we're dealing with it. If we look at the definition of what burnout is, and I looked at an old presentation that I've got, it's physical or mental collapse caused by overwork or stress. And this is where high levels of professionals are likely to be burnt out. Now, it's interesting. The World Health Organization didn't even classify it as any form of phenomenon or disease or whatever until 2020, something like that. And they said it should only be related to occupational means, i.e. work. Rubbish. No, it's a combination of different stuff, okay? Now, I'm not going to get all sort of like into the detail. I could, but I'm not going to. You can watch some other videos where I've done that before in the past. But let's come back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So when it comes to the whole sort of like love and belonging part, you need to be very selective with the types of people that you have in your life. You have to. You have to. And you have to give them sort of like the according sort of energy. I've done a video on the 5 different types of friends. Okay. But you need to find the ones that are energy boosting. There are some friends who are best one-to-one. There are some friends who are best one-to-many. There are some friends who can do all of that stuff. There are other friends who can talk about anything and everything. There are some friends who just want to talk about themselves. There's some friends who are just there for banter and enjoyment and high life. There are some friends who are existential and deep. There are some friends who will motivate you and push you. And there are some friends who suck and drain you. And there are some friends who have sheep's clothing. That's the reality of the situation. Now, I think my friendship groups are better than before, but all of those ones exist in some guys. 100%, without a doubt, even if it's a small amount, because you've got other people to compare to. That's the reality of the situation. Some people will show you more love than others. And so this whole part of love and belonging, this part here, you need to be able to create the right sense of connection, as it says there, through values. That's how you define good friendship. Even if they don't have the same value sort of like sentiment as you, is it supporting what you're about? Does it support it? Maybe you're not as ambitious, but maybe ambition is big for them. That's useful for you, but what can you provide for them as well? So there needs to be a symbiosis. And as my friend Nashe says, there has to be a peace bubble. Stress is just not the one. Stress is a killer, my friends. This is why I'm doing this video. So following on from that, we have esteem, respect, strength, freedom, all this kind of stuff there. And with this one here, yeah, this is really about, for me, developing your portfolio career. This is why I talk about this stuff. You have to think to yourself, how do you develop a voice in this world? It doesn't have to be a loud one. It just needs to be a true one. It needs to be an authentic one. How do you develop a voice? This really comes down to understanding what you truly believe, okay? Doing the inner work. Maybe you do need a coach and all that kind of stuff there. Who knows? But sometimes that's not enough. Sometimes it's about consumption first and then taking action and then assimilating and understanding that knowledge and information, like I said in a previous video. Sometimes it's about that. Maybe it's betting on yourself and applying for stuff. I did my video on how to become a trustee / non-executive director. Check out that video. It's not going to be popular because not everyone cares about that, but they care about it, but not enough to go deep via YouTube video. That video has got gems in there, man. I'm not going to lie to you. Like, that's something you should check out. But we'll see if people check it out. It's up to them. And so sometimes this is centered around your personal brand. What authentic image do you want to create? This image comes through writing, speaking, video, talks, how you interact with people, how you're developing yourself. What are your theories? What are your philosophies? What do you truly believe in? What sort of acquired skills are you developing? What problems are you solving? This esteem builds your confidence. Who are you helping and do they give you great feedback? Feedback is key. Always ask for feedback. So again, you're building yourself, slowly building. And the thing is, like, the reason why I love this so much here is if you think about, I'm thinking about the Fibonacci sequence. For those of you who don't know what the Fibonacci sequence is, essentially, that is defined as God's sort of like mathematical code for how nature works, okay? And so the reason I'm thinking of the Fibonacci sequence is because, and I'll show you just so you know for yourself. There's all these different patterns that exist in nature, okay? But they are embedded within each other and create these great macro structures that look like the things that we see with the naked eye. But I'm saying this because it starts off small. It starts off very, very small in terms of what we're trying to do, okay? So that smallness is starting off with the physiological needs, okay? And then it starts to build and build and build and build and build. It becomes natural. We're getting to the self-actualization stage. And so the self-actualization stage is when you are truly seated in a space that feels truly like your higher self. We can never truly be our higher self in this physical plane. But when I say higher self, I mean a true, you just feel it, man. You just get it. You just got it. Do you understand? So whether we'll ever get to that stage or not is questionable, but you can get closer to it. You know, perfection is something that we move towards. It's something we move towards in terms of an ideal, but we have to also remember we are also perfect by nature. As my friend says, you're perfect by design. It's a big thing. It's a really, really big thing. And so hopefully you've been able to see and understand like why you need to focus on this stuff. I've come to this slide, but there's no need to come to this slide. So let me just come off this. Hopefully you're starting to see why this stuff is really important to understand. When I talk about balance, I'm talking about balance in context to you. Like I'm talking about all of this kind of stuff there. If you're feeling signs of like drained most of the time, or helplessness, or feeling trapped, or cynical about stuff, or doubtful, or anxious, or overwhelmed, or taking longer to do things, or avoidant, you're probably burnt out. And burnout, there's no real cure apart from getting out of the environment forever. There has to be a change. That's the only way to solve it. I mean, there are so many contributions to it. This can come from feeling very isolated. You could be burnt out from doing nothing. That is a form of burnout. You could be burnt out through the fact that you don't have job security, or you're worried about money. So you have to really sit down. Like, this is why you have to sit down and think to yourself, What must I change? What must I change? I need to change something. This can't stay this way. And so this is really a plea. This is why this is specific to the 30 to 40-year-olds. This may be applicable to people outside of these ranges as well. That's perfectly fine. But I'm saying this because I know you know what I'm saying. I know you know what I'm saying. It is not easy in these streets, but it's about making a decision, okay? Rather than being distracted by all this stuff. And you know, for our generation, we're so used to saying, oh, I'm multifaceted by nature. That's true, of course. But there's also strategy, my friend. What is your strategy to ensure that you can overcome this burnout? I understand and I accept that there are some of you who just have to do certain things. Like some of you may be going through really, really big life changes. Paying off debt, getting a house, getting married, having kids. That's a lot of stuff, you know. That is a lot of stuff, especially if it's happened in succession. But the point I'm making is, even amidst all of that stuff, what can you control? What can you control? There is this whole model called the locus of control. I've spoken about this before. And it looks at specifically what are the things in your environment that you can control? What are the things that you can influence? And what are the things you just have to let go of? There has to be a proactiveness, regardless of whether you feel like it or not, rather than a reactiveness. If you're more reactive, they state that you are less in control. Think about those situations where you're at work, where they're like, you got to do this, you got to do that. You're just like, that's why you quiet quit. But if you're proactive, you only look at your emails twice a day, as an example, in long succession, or you only respond to certain people because you know you got X you need to prioritize. There's a difference. Even if it feels annoying, there is a difference because you are in more control. Maybe control's not the word. Maybe it's manage. Who knows? But you know what I'm talking about. So just step back, look back at your life and see how you can get a better sense of control. And there is one final thing I want to talk about. There is a way to manage this, okay? Now, of course, you need to know what your sense of purpose is and what you're looking to do. Hence why I spoke about what you believe and all that kind of jazz there. Have a feel, okay? Because that will help you make decisions. But there are two things you can do. Number one, you can look at your calendar and look over the next 2 weeks or 4 weeks. And you should be using a calendar, by the way, because I don't know how anyone survives without a calendar these days. Whether that's a physical one or a digital one, you should be using your calendar. Like, come on. Anywho, that's just me. Maybe I'm just over the top. But look at your calendar, or at least write it out based on what you think you're doing for the next 2 weeks or 4 weeks. And do it based on an hourly sort of like schedule. And just look at it and think to yourself, do I need to do this? Do I need to do that? Give it a grading scale, okay? This grading scale could be based on colors. So maybe red is something that you don't actually have to do, but as a, you know, it's a nice to have. Amber could be possibly good to do, and green is you have to do it, okay? If 3 colors is not enough, maybe, you know, blue could be it's a permanent thing. Whatever, you can decide what that looks like. And remove the things that are red. Maybe you have to meet certain people in one day. I remember when I was writing my book, Understand, Reach, Expand, 15 Super Effective Ways to Manage Your Mind. I'll never forget, it was my friend Nicholas. He kept on trying to meet up with me over 3 months and said I can only do Thursdays. And he thought it was ridiculous, because it was. That's what I'm saying. If you want to achieve something, you have to be ridiculous. You have to be unreasonable, as Les Brown says. Be unreasonable, because this is your life. Whether you're a Christian or this or that and you believe it's loaned to you, you're still managing this life. Doesn't matter if it's loaned to you or not. This is your life. So you decide the rules. There are different principles that we have. There are different laws that we have. But I've always said this, and I'll say it again. There are no real rules in life. Remember that. You are writing the scripts. They talk about this in psychology. Scripts and schemas. We kind of run this autopilot, so to speak, based on things that have happened in our lives. You are writing the rules. Go back to the rule book. A great book to help you like unearth this stuff is from, I think his name is Dr. Steve Peters. The Path Through the Jungle. His original book was Chimp Paradox. Check it out. That'll help you understand the sort of intricacies of your mindset. But you are writing the rules. You, no one else. So decide them. So that's one thing. Check your schedule just in general. And the second thing is think about this acronym called SCHEMES. So I think this stands for, and if I forget, I forget. Systems, cash or money, helpers, expertise, materials, I'm going to say equipment, and systems. That's it. So think about all of these things that are contributing or negating from what you're trying to do, depending on what you're focusing on. SCHEMES is a great project management tool that you can use as well. This is something I like to introduce within my contracting space as well, depending on where I'm at. So again, if you need something to help you get onto this path of keeping things aligned, on track, recorded, all of that kind of stuff there, of course, I'm going to talk about my life navigation system. This is obviously part of it, but if I go to the life navigation system here, this will just give you an idea. And I spoke about this before, and there are these different sections where I talk about priming, what that process looks like. How do I manage my activities and everything else? How do I specifically journal and track that stuff and do it in a way where it's rhythmic? And also looking at those pillars of mastery that I spoke about before and the different sections within those pillars of mastery as well. This is life-saving, okay? It's really helped me, especially at the beginning of this quarter of the year. So if this is something you're interested in, then check it out below and you can learn more information, copy it for yourself and start using it straight away. No questions asked. So if this has been helpful to you, again, please let me know in the comments below. I'd love feedback. I'd love to understand what people like, what people want to hear about, what sort of topics people want to see. And again, if you want to learn more about life management, positive psychology, and portfolio careers, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. And as always, my friends, understand, reach, and expand. Peace.